Welcome to this presentation discussing the Workday payroll impacts of the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. My name is Amy Rude. I'm a lead functional consultant at Syssero. I've been in HR for 20 years, specializing in benefits and payroll, and spent the last 7 years in Workday payroll, absence, and time tracking implementations and post-production support. I'm happy to share what we know about the Big Beautiful Bill and ideas on how to approach meeting the new requirements. But first, please note that Safe Harbor applies. This session is informational and is not meant to be tax or legal advice. Interpretation and implementation may vary. New information on requirements and uptake is still forthcoming. The information provided in this presentation is what we know as of the week of August 18, 2025. Today we will review the what, our interpretation of the impact, the when, requirements, and possible Workday solutions, including a demo, and we have a resource section with general configuration steps, links to the information provided so far by the government, and some helpful links from the community and the Workday admin guide. So, what is the One Big Beautiful Bill Act? This act reduces taxes, reduces or increases spending for various federal programs, increases the statutory debt limit, and otherwise addresses agencies and programs throughout the federal government. We are going to discuss the impact from a payroll lens. First, no tax on tips. WhiteHouse.gov has provided this summary of the impact. Second, no tax on overtime. Here's the impact summary for this from WhiteHouse.gov. Okay, so we know that tips and overtime are not going to be taxed, but what does that mean for us as payroll professionals and Workday administrators? For tips, our interpretation of the bill is that there will be no changes of tax calculations or withholdings from payroll for tips. This is a deduction that must be claimed when individuals file their personal taxes. Although the change is retroactive to January 2025 for the 2025 tax year, the bill provides a transition rule to allow employers to provide approximate amounts for qualified tips in 2025, and the IRS indicates they will provide transition relief for the new reporting requirement. The IRS will provide a list of occupations for which qualified tips are applicable to by October 2nd. For overtime, like the tips, our interpretation of the bill is that there will be no changes of tax calculations or withholdings from payroll for overtime. This is also a deduction that must be claimed when individuals file their personal taxes. Same as the tips provision, although the change is retroactive to January 2025 for the 2025 tax year, the bill provides a transition rule to allow employers to provide approximate amounts for qualified overtime in 2025, and the IRS indicates they will provide transition relief for the new reporting requirement. It's important to note, qualified overtime compensation only includes the FLSA premium payments for hours worked over 40 in a work week, meaning only the 0.5 time premium of the 1.5 time of the regular rate of pay is considered overtime compensation. Let's review the high-level timeline with important dates. The new policy applies to tips and overtime retroactively to January 2025. However, the Act and the IRS provide for a transitional period in 2025, allowing for estimated reporting prior to 2026. To clarify which businesses are applicable, the IRS will publish the list of occupations that customarily receive tips by October 2nd. Full and accurate reporting compliance is expected for January 2026, and this act is set to expire after the 2028 tax year on January 1st, 2029. So, what's required? These are the requirements from the irs.gov website. And unless IRS-y speak, that means you'll need to file a report showing the qualified tips with the occupation of the employee or qualified overtime, and also provide that information to the employee. It sounds fairly simple, right? It might be. Let's talk about possible Workday solutions to meet these requirements. If you've been following the Workday community post, you've seen that there is a contributed solution from Workday. The following possible solutions are the same as or very similar to the solutions provided. The contributed solution also contains additional details, screenshots, instructions, and custom report definitions to assist with implementing these changes and extracting data. The contributed solution is linked in the resource section of this deck. Unless the IRS specifies otherwise, we propose utilizing Box 14 Other to report qualified tips and overtime. Depending on your current payroll configuration for overtime and tips, you may only need to update the W-2 box configuration to include the calculation for these amounts. We'll discuss different scenarios, starting with the simplest and moving towards the complex. I will also be presenting several steps in a demo, and instructions are included at the end of this deck. For the tips, once you've mapped the qualified tips earning to Box 14 Other, we still need to report the employee's occupation. At this time, there is no way to add this to the W-2 configuration. We recommend subscribing to the community post from the Workday US Payroll Product Manager and the contributed solution linked at the end of this presentation. If Workday does not provide a solution for this, we can always leverage a custom report to furnish the data to the IRS. If you have existing tip earnings for non-qualified tips or non-qualified occupations, you'll need to create a new memo or earning that only pulls those earnings that are qualified. Otherwise, you can map your existing tip earnings to Box 14 Other and wait for further information on reporting the occupation. For the overtime, if your overtime configuration has a clearly defined calculation for the 0.5 time premium, we can map that to Box 14 Other. However, if you do not have a clear 0.5 time premium calculation, if you offer overtime that is more generous than FLSA requirements, or if you're not currently using the Department of Labor's definition of regular rate of pay, we'll need to create a new calculation to only calculate the qualified overtime. I want to note that Workday offers step-by-step instructions to build compliant FLSA earnings in the Administrator Guide. We've linked the page in the resource section at the end of this deck. You can deploy this yourself or work with your AMS partner for this enhancement. I'm going to discuss a possible solution to meet the reporting requirement. It is designed to be used as a memo earning to calculate the qualified overtime compensation without making any changes to actual payments to your employees. In order to use the proposed calculation, you must already have FLSA configuration in your tenant. Ideally, this calculation will use data from Workday Time Tracking. If you are not using Workday Time Tracking, your process will be a bit more manual. If you are not set up with the Workday FLSA framework, get started on it or engage your AMS partner as soon as possible to have this live in time for 2026. Remember, you can make an estimate of overtime in 2025, but you're required to have accurate reporting in 2026. It's a good idea to review your FLSA configuration for accuracy. We've provided some helpful links in the resource section at the end of this deck to get you started. If you're still unsure after reviewing the material, please reach out to us. We are more than happy to help. Okay, let's look at the GMS tenant and walk through the proposed configuration. First, we'll review the W-2 configuration. We'll navigate to View W-2 Box Configuration, select our tax year, and find Box 14 Other. You'll see we have the option to configure this box. When I click on Edit, I can choose Years, Calculations, and Labels. I've configured an example of what the W-2 box configuration could look like. I have attached earnings for tips and the related calculations for the overtime premium. If I had different calculations for my estimate for 2025, I'd create a separate line for 2025 and then one with the new calculation for 2026 to 2028. For overtime, if you only have FLSA 1.5 overtime and your premium separated as either its own earning or as a related calculation, you're done. For tips, if all of your tipped workers are on the IRS's list of qualified occupations and the tips received are considered qualified tips, then the only item left to worry about is reporting the occupation. If your overtime setup is more complex or you need to split out qualified and non-qualified tips, we'll need to create new calculations. Next, let's discuss time tracking updates. If you only have weekly overtime that is paid at 1.5 times the regular rate of pay, no further action is required for your time tracking setup. However, many organizations have overtime policies that are more generous than the FLSA requires. The first step to determining the qualified wages is to determine the qualifying hours. We'll need to create a new weekly overtime calculation to calculate the OBBBA eligible overtime hours. You'll see that this is a standard overtime calculation and should include all time tags for regular hours worked. But we're not going to remove any tags. This will just be an additional tag for our calculation. The effective date is critical based on how you will implement this change. If you'd like to have Workday calculate the retro data for 2025, you can try to make this effective the first day of the first week of the year, then run time calculations to recalculate and extract your data. This could be very messy. It may be best to extract the data via reporting, load as payroll input, and make this effective during the current period or the first period of 2026. Note that you can create a new time tag from the time calculation directly. You'll see that I've already created one here, but when you click in, you can go create time calculation tag, name it whatever you want, and save it directly in here. You're going to assign your time calculation group to a group that is for the United States non-exempt FLSA workers, and click Done to save. The next critical item is setting the priority. This calculation will need to occur before your regular overtime calculations. I've made it first in my test tenant. It's very important to review and test your overall time tracking configuration to ensure that this new calculation is incorporated without any unintended effects. Next, we'll create our memo earning. This will calculate our qualified overtime. This is going to be just like the FLSA premium earning that you may already have. If you don't have it, you can get instructions in the Workday Administrator Guide. We link that for your reference in the resources section of this deck. Again, it's important that we discuss the effective date. If you use January 1st, 2025, you may be able to trigger retro manually and force the calculations for the full year. This could get complex if you have many unsupported events. It may be best to come up with an estimation for 2025 and payroll input into the new earning, then allow it to calculate each period in 2026 and beyond. You could also estimate the amount paid so far this year and get this calculation running immediately for more accuracy. It's up to you how you'd like to handle the transition. If you decide that you want to estimate hours and payroll input them for 2025, you can use the 1/1/2025 effective date and payroll input as the calculation and eligibility, then create a new effective date for the automation. We've set our eligibility to be looking for non-exempt employees with time tracking hours, or if you don't have Workday time tracking, you can use payroll input for the eligibility as well. The calculation will be hours times half of the premium rate. It's a simple arithmetic calculation using related calculations. We're going to allow retro and use the FLSA configuration here. We'll add each of the related calculations for this calculation to perform. Hours unprorated, either payroll input or from time tracking. Make sure you mark these as FLSA premium hours if you want the premium adjustments to calculate when FLSA eligible earnings are paid for the period. Next, premium half-time FLSA rate. Again, this is just a related calculation. And you can create this calculation if you don't already have it, but you probably already do in your tenant. It's just the FLSA rate multiplied by 0.5. Last is the FLSA rate, and this is going to be the Workday delivered calculation for the FLSA rate. Again, if you want this to recalculate when you pay FLSA wages, make sure that you attach the FLSA premium rate calculation type here. Once you have that, you can adjust your input allowed and display options however you'd like to see them. The time calculation tags are key here if you're using Workday time tracking. If you are using daily double time, 7th day consecutive overtime, etc., you can attach each of those earning tags here, and this memo will calculate the halftime premium for all overtime hours. However, if the employee does not have 40 regular hours for the week, you will not have an accurate calculation. If you think this scenario applies to you, you'll need to create that new time calculation and tag for the OBBBA overtime as previously discussed and attach it here. The last step is on the non-effective dated tab. We'll use memo entries to ensure we aren't making additional payments to employees. We're only calculating these amounts. If you're not already using memo entries, you'll need to validate that your run category is properly set up to calculate these. You can see here that additional pay component groups to calculate, memo entries, is on the General tab. You can configure these for non-active, which is important if you're going to do payroll input for 2025 to ensure that this calculates for those on leave or terminated workers. Once you've added the new memo earning, you can refer back to the instructions to add this new calculation to the W-2 box configuration and rest easy that you're covered for these new requirements. Every tenant is different. Every tenant contains unique configuration. Please be sure you are testing any updates thoroughly. It's encouraged to engage with an AMS partner who can help guide you through the configuration and testing to ensure that these changes are done accurately and without impacting other calculations or configuration. This deck will be available for download, and we've provided various resources to assist you. We have instructions to update the time tracking configuration and an example of what that might look like, how to create the payroll memo earning, and an example of what that might look like, steps to create a new tip earning, and steps to update the W-2 box configuration to use your existing calculations to easily report this data, as well as an example of what that might look like. We've included various links, including government updates, Workday Administrator Guide links, helpful community posts, and don't forget to subscribe to the main community posts that are providing updates from Workday and the contributed solution. Note that the best way to subscribe is not to comment following, but to select subscribe from the drop-down menu. This prevents your fellow community members from getting emailed with your note that you are following and ensures that you receive an email each time an update is made to the post. I hope you found this session informative. The Syssero solution team is here to help if you need anything. Please reach out if you have any questions or would like our help with these compliance updates. Thank you.